All eyes are on the primary elections. The presidential race has been driving people to the polls from coast to coast. But there are issues that a yes or no could make an impact on your life before your vote for president. On this episode of Let's Talk Cincy, we're looking at the important issues on the Ohio ballot, from school levies.
We have teachers and bus drivers and custodians and it's people who support our kids. So, when we start making cuts, it has to go into staff.
To new leaders in the jail.
If you want an activist, you don't want Jim Neal. If you want a lawman, that's what I'm here for.
And I did not bully people. I was the boss. And as the boss, you have to speak the truth.
What you need to know to make an informed decision.
WLWT. This is Let's Talk Cincy, presented by Western and Southern Financial Group. Put our financial strength behind you.
We are getting you ready to cast your ballot in the Ohio primary on March 17th. Welcome to Let's Talk Cincy. I'm Alexis Rogers.
And I'm Curtis Fuller. In addition to voting for your party's nominee for president, you will select candidates for Congress, state legislature, local offices, and school levies.
And speaking of school levies, in Loveland, the battle lines are drawn again over school funding. The school district is trying to pass a levy after almost 80% of the voters said no in November to a school spending issue.
Now the district has a new plan it hopes voters will approve. WLWT News 5's Andrew Setters has a look now at what's different this time and what's on the line.
Whether you are for or against the school funding levy here in Loveland, you'll have a chance to have your say coming up soon. And this is a very different spending issue than voters just rejected back in November. Honks help, but more than signs and superheroes are needed to hold off budget cuts in Loveland City schools.
We have teachers and bus drivers and custodians and it's people who support our kids. So, when we start making cuts, it has to go into staff.
Last November, nearly 80% of voters said no to a big spending issue. This request is smaller, just an operating levy. Superintendent Amy Krause has spent months engaging in community discussions about the district's needs.
Overwhelming support for our schools and our teachers and the programs and the things that we do here in the district. But with school funding and property taxes, we have an affordability issue. So we needed to come back to the table and do business differently.
So I'm taking 2/3 of 6. What is 2/3 of 6?
While intermediate school students crunch the numbers in class, the board's been doing some budget subtraction too, cutting $2.7 million in operating expenses and 15 staff members. If voters say no again, another 25 positions will go, along with high school busing. It's clear the community is not 100% on board, but Krause is hopeful this smaller request will be approved.
We've been able to have great conversations with an educated community about how we can do business differently and why we need the money that we need.
The impact to Loveland homeowners, about $240 per year in additional taxes for every $100,000 in home value. The $6.9 million operating levy will be on the ballot for voters here in Loveland coming up March 17th. Andrew Setters, WLWT News 5.
That was a very helpful way to get everyone up to speed and where we're actually going to go ahead and start our conversation now. Joining us now is Lynn Mangan as well as Juliet Tissett. Thank you both so much for joining us. So there's something very specific on this ballot. What do you think is the main thing? And I'll start with you, Lynn. What's the main thing that people are not talking about when it comes to what's on this ballot?
Sure. So I think it's really important to remember that this is an operating levy only. So this is to maintain our schools. It is not for buildings, it's not for facilities, so it's an operating levy only. And I think it's critical that we talk about that our district is investing in making sure that we do both optimize our resources and reduce our expenses as a district. So the last 5 years, we've averaged just over 5% in terms of our expense increases, and our district is committed to 2.7% over the next 5 years, is what our current forecast shows. And I think it's also imperative that we talk about that public schools are the foundation of a strong community. It's what sets our children up for success, and so it's critical that we continue to fund our schools in the Loveland community.
And Juliet, when you think about what's on this ballot and what might be missing, what do you think is missing? What should people be talking about?
I think what's missing is an explanation as to how the numbers fit. If we're talking about maintaining services and only doing a 2.7% increase for the next 4 years, then a $6.25 million a year levy is not necessary. It's too excessive. They already spent in excess $6 million last year, $6.4 million last year, and they only justified $3.1 million of it. So we don't even know where the other $3 million was spent. So until I know where my last dollar was spent, I don't want to give another dollar into a large question mark of where it's going to go. If the increases is only going to be a certain amount, then they don't need $3 million more than that going forward.
When we talk about who's coming to the table to talk about this, right? Because I think, I don't live in Loveland, but we have so many viewers from Loveland, and that's been the thing, is how do we get both sides of this thing at the same table?
I have personally applied for the Board Planning Commission. They have not announced who is part of that, but I think that's critical, that our board has had, and our administration has had several open sessions. They're listening. They're asking for community involvement to continue to solve the problem of school funding and to be making sure that our kids are living in a very competitive environment. So anything we can do to set them up for success at an early age, expose them to more opportunities, is a must-have, and I feel that our district is committed to that.
Well, I've been to several open office hours with Dr. Krause alone, as well as with a couple of my colleagues, with Mr. Hawley, who's our CFO, and John Ames, who's the business coordinator, who's the building coordinator. And we've had hours of conversation where questions are asked and not answered. So while the yes side continues to say the board and the administration are listening, they do listen and then they don't answer. So we actually filed a records request for some invoices for some expenses that we are unaware of. We don't understand where they went, in millions of dollars. And that records request was filed on January 25th, and we still haven't gotten those answers. So we keep hearing that the board and the administration is listening to the community, and that may very well be true, but without answers, what's the point of listening?
And as we close this out, this is definitely such a big talker in Loveland, and we know that a lot is at stake no matter where people really sit on a table. Can we agree?
Yes.
Yes.
Sure.
Well, ladies, thank you so much for joining us today. And of course, we are really excited to continue going through what people are voting for this time around. Coming up on Let's Talk Cincy, casting your ballots based on your beliefs, how values play into what you decide on Election Day.
Well, as we continue this discussion about the importance of voting, I want to introduce you to someone, ELISA Yancey. She is the co-founder and chief creative officer of a great project, a journalism project called Ohio Values. And first of all, welcome. Tell me a little bit about Ohio Values.
So Ohio Values is a media collaborative in which 6 different news organizations from across the state of Ohio will be using a different kind of story gathering technique that has been perfected through an organization that I co-founded called A Picture's Worth, to really get to the heart of the issues that matter to voters rather than focusing on surface sort of horse race coverage like we're used to seeing.
Yeah, the whole old saying, truth matters. Is that part of the focus of this?
Well, absolutely, and I think the interesting piece is that truth is sort of subjective in a lot of ways, and I think a lot of times in journalism in particular, we sort of flatten out what we mean when we say what people care about, and so what Ohio Values does is it allows reporters to go out into their communities and talk to people about what's really important to them through a very personal lens, and that lens is a single photograph from their own lives that represents what's important to them.
What have you found so far? What's important to them?
Well, it's fascinating when you ask people to show you photographs about what really matters to them. Oftentimes it's pictures of family members and family members who maybe have been through some pretty traumatic events. Sometimes it's images of themselves in times of their lives when they've really overcome some really big challenges. And sometimes it's just when they are in a moment of sort of awakening about some piece of themselves that they haven't maybe been aware of before.
Probably not a lot of photos of them working.
Not necessarily, or
okay.
not a lot of pictures of their food, say, or of their coffee cup, which you often see, because we're surrounded by so many images today. So part of the impetus behind A Picture's Worth, which is the umbrella for Ohio values, is to kind of take a closer look at the images that surround us in our daily lives and really think about what they're saying about us and what they're telling us in terms of the world we live in and the people we interact with.
How do I, if I am just an average person, how do I access Ohio values so I could see some of those photos and other information?
Sure. So right now we are in the story gathering phase. The journalists have just been trained to interview in a very different way than traditional journalism interviews go, and I've been a journalist for 30-some years, so it's time we shake things up a little bit. And so they are out gathering stories this month, next month, and through June, and those will all live on an Ohio Values website. They aren't there yet, but people can already go to apicturesworth.org to find out more about the project and to see how they can invest in it.
All right, thanks a lot, ELISA Yancey. Thank you. There could be a changing of the guard at the jail. We take a look at the candidates running for sheriff in Hamilton County, their differences and their platforms when Let's Talk Cincy returns. Welcome back to Let's Talk Cincy. Election security is not just about making sure your vote stays safe.
It's also about personal security from the coronavirus health concern as well. Both issues are being addressed from Washington, D.C. all the way down to your local polling place. Homeland Security agents are working to protect all borders of elections from potential hackers. And Ohio has already taken steps to beef up security on its websites to match or exceed federal standards.
As for the coronavirus, Ohio's Secretary of State has ordered all polling locations inside places where senior citizens live to be moved. That means dozens of new sites throughout greater Cincinnati. All voters who are affected will be notified of that change. Another important decision for voters, whether to improve transportation and infrastructure in Hamilton County.
This is a big one. Issue 7, the SORTA levy, means millions for construction and busing, and the sales tax increase means more money out of pocket for some, but it's actually a savings for others.
We'll be able to invest $130 million into our transportation system to transform the way people get around.
Pete Metz with the Cincinnati Chamber thinks Issue 7 has the potential to make a big impact.
Making sure that if you want to work in this community, we can make sure that you can get to a job. If you want to make sure you get to the doctor or get your kid to daycare or just enjoy everything that Hamilton County has to offer, Issue 7 is going to make that possible.
About $30 million would be invested in transportation projects, giving the county funding for big projects like the Western Hills Viaduct. The bulk of the money would fund the Transit Authority, allowing Metro to make big changes.
Our ability to connect people to jobs in Blue Ash and in Springdale and in the far reaches of Hamilton County is going to make all the difference when you think about helping people get from where they live today to where the jobs are.
A lot of organizations are on board with the transportation levy, but we want to look at exactly what it does. It's a county-wide sales tax increase of 0.8%. Linked to that increase is a decrease in the city's income tax by eliminating the money that goes to pay for SORTA now. So people who live and work in Hamilton County outside the city limits will see a tax increase, but
if you live or work in the city of Cincinnati, under this plan, you'll actually receive a tax cut.
And none of the money would fund the Cincinnati streetcar because SORTA is no longer involved in that project.
Well, Commitment 2020 could bring a new sheriff in town. You see, the Hamilton County Sheriff is up for re-election, and he is facing a strong challenge from a former longtime employee. Jim Neal is pretty direct about defining himself and his role as Hamilton County Sheriff.
I stay in my lane, and that's what I do.
He fashions himself as a lawman who does not permit partisan politics to intrude on his duties.
I won't deviate from that. If you want an activist, you don't want Jim Neal. If you want a lawman, that's what I'm here for.
30 years as a deputy, Neal has been in charge as sheriff now for 2 terms. But he did not get the endorsement of fellow Democrats. Instead, they endorsed his primary challenger, Charmaine McGuffey.
Yes, I'm disappointed I didn't get the endorsement because I have a proven track record of being successful in the general election, so they're flirting with the possibility of losing the seat, the party is.
Consider this. It was March 2016, a Donald Trump rally in Westchester, where Neal's presence on stage drew Democratic darts.
But I'm not a political person, so maybe that's why I put myself in harm's way, because I don't think like a politician.
He thinks the changes he's implementing will help carry the day. New 12-hour shifts that provide more off time, collaborations such as with Maslow's Army, third-floor dorm-style construction for inmates with medical and mental issues.
Those programs don't start and stop with million-dollar build-outs. They start with the effort and the desire to make change happen inside that jail.
McGuffey is trying to ride reform into the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office. The move to pass mass incarceration and motivate inmates to turn their lives around. She wants addicts who are arrested to get a more complete evaluation of what their needs are.
Right now in the jail, there is very little of that, and we need to assess everyone where they stand when they enter that jail.
McGuffey has 34 years of experience in the jail, courts, and law enforcement. She created the Women's Recovery Pod. She says while in charge of the jail, its rating improved dramatically. McGuffey and Neal came up together, share a lifelong West Side history. He promoted her to major, praised her innovative work, but says a number of deputies are in fear of McGuffey being the next sheriff.
That's why I'm campaigning real hard. There's a number of deputies that are in fear of Charmaine being the next sheriff.
She denies crossing a line, instead calling it holding people accountable.
And I did not bully people. I was the boss. And as the boss, you have to speak the truth, and you have to say it the way it is.
She describes her candidacy as more about passion for reform than a platform for grudges. But she admits if she loses, she won't endorse Neal. She accused him of waving a Donald Trump MAGA cap at her in command staff meetings. She says she was offended.
I did not find that to be a joke. I did not find that to be funny. It made me feel targeted. It made me feel alone.
McGuffey says she's heard the rumblings that question whether she can unseat a two-term sheriff and then a strong Republican-backed candidate in Bruce Hoffbauer.
And what I say to those people is, the real question is, can either one of those men beat me? That's how I feel.
Meanwhile, Neal cultivates a big stick image that is mission-driven, not activist-inspired.
I'm a lawman. I'm going to stay in my lane.
Well, you know, this is an interesting race because
very interesting
here in Hamilton County, we had a long-time sheriff in Simon Lee. So folks aren't used to these type of heated battles for county sheriff. It is interesting. They, you know, had this friendship or work friendship.
So much history there.
Yeah. Well, the history is changing just a bit
before our eyes.
and you heard me mention Bruce Hoffbauer, his family well known in law enforcement. So this whole dynamic in Hamilton County will be interesting.
One to watch.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, coming up, more school levies on the ballot.
Next on Let's Talk Cincy, people in Mason weigh in on this heated debate of how to pay for educating our students.
Welcome back, everyone. As we continue this discussion, a school levy is dividing the Mason community.
The two sides can't even see eye to eye on how much the levy would cost. WLWT News 5's John London explains why some people see the same words in different lights.
The signs are big, the controversy even larger. Mason must decide, accurate or misleading.
Simply, it's not correct. Your taxes are not going to be raised by 20%.
This is a 9.96 mil levy disguised as a 4.71 mil levy.
Two women see the same wording and come away with different conflicting interpretations. Kirsten Lupinski, mother of 3 Mason students, helps co-chair the campaign for Issue 12. Sharon Poe is a longtime Mason taxpayer who leads the campaign against it.
We all love this community, and we want the best education for our children. But at what cost do we have to spend?
All Mason's asking for is to maintain the quality that they currently have. And as a parent, I live in this district because of Mason schools.
Mason says without the levy, the band, orchestra, and Holly Schreier's 6th grade choir will shrink. Music would lose at least 3 positions. Mrs. Hartsock's 3rd grade gifted class would face elimination. Those with signs in their yards are letting the signs speak for them, mostly reluctant to go public, even a Mason grad who put a son through Mason schools.
Makes you think a little bit more when you actually see that bill come in.
He's a senior who's voting no, acknowledging he's not clicked on the district's website to see what the school is saying. County Auditor Matt Nolan tells us it is accurate to say if the levy fails and you factor in a current bond being paid off in 2022, the price difference between passage and failure will be 20%. But, quote, it is not accurate to say that current taxes are going up 20%. If the levy passes, taxes will go up 8 to 9% from where they are today, end quote.
4.71 mils comes on as an increase.
Superintendent Jonathan Cooper saying that's what taxpayers will feel, even though the levy's 5 mils more than that.
In the second year, however, we're paying off debt, and so 5.25 mils actually falls off.
So on homes valued at $300,000, he says it's roughly 500 additional tax dollars any way you slice it if the levy passes. Sharon Poe believes the district should have done this in a more honest way. Kirsten Lupinski's completely comfortable with how it's presented. Both agree on one fact: the district hasn't passed a levy in 15 years. John London, WLWT News 5.
Remember, the Ohio primary is on March 17th in Indiana, May 5th, 2020, Kentucky, Tuesday, May 19th, 2020. And you can find all of that on our Commitment 2020 coverage on our website at WLWT.com.
Well, thanks for joining us for this edition of Let's Talk Cincy. We want to hear from you, of course.
Absolutely. Email us your ideas at ltc@WLWT.com. And you can actually already check out some full episodes as well as stories from Let's Talk Cincy by going to the menu tab of WLWT.com and clicking on Let's Talk Cincy. We love to keep everyone connected, don't we, Curtis?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, go out and vote. We shouldn't have to tell you that. And of course, we're going to keep you updated on this coronavirus thing. It hopefully won't impact the primary season, which is coming up for Ohio this coming Tuesday. Well, we'll see you next week for another edition of Let's Talk Cincy.
Continue to watch us and stay encouraged.